Okay.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. As Eric mentioned, I represent Met One Instruments. We're out of Grants Pass. And latest someone was asking about if it was out by the Merlin Airport. At one time it was. So kind of the history of Met One, Tom Popberg is the owner. It's a privately owned company. His business partner, Lou, they started out together in the 70s with meteorological equipment. He's a self-made man, climbed the towers, the whole gamut early on. And as they grew the business, they reached a point that they saw a little bit different paths to go with products, and they split the company off. And Lou took the business out by the Merlin Airport, and that was called Pacific Scientific, in which they included a Met One product line in the midst of their equipment and other things that they did. So as history went, Lou sold it off, and it became part of a larger company called Hawk Ultra Analytics, and they do still have a counter called Met One. So with the current Met One, we're located in a couple of different places in Grants Pass. The main manufacturing facility is 1600 Washington Street. The old building that was the BLM OSP is now the corporate headquarters where engineering and sales and so forth is at. So I hired on there after I retired from the Navy, and that was about 2006. I went through Rogue Community College. I did electronics in the military, went through Rogue Community College's electronics program and got the AAS in electronic technologies, and that got me in on the board level. At that time is when everybody was talking about offshore. A lot of the companies were moving, particularly to China and so forth. And Mr. Popberg took the stance of onshore. So a lot of our products would get held up because of the machine shop or something to this effect. It was outside his control. So as companies were leaving, he started expanding, buying CNC key machines and et cetera, and bringing it all in-house to have as much control as possible. Even electronic circuit cards. We have a pick-and-place machine that our electrical engineers design our cards, and they can take it through the whole process of actually manufacturing circuit cards there, or having the capabilities to send larger batches out to a board house. So my involvement has grown into going through the service department and ultimately becoming a liaison between customers and engineering. So I offer field support, sales assistance, what is the right product for what their goals are. And when I'm not on travel, I spend a lot of time with the engineering department bringing back what is it that makes this product as easy as possible for the customer to be able to use. Great engineers can think something are very simple when they thought it up in their head, but when the common user goes to use it, it might not be as simple. So that's part of my aspect that I deal with. The entrepreneur part of it, I'm not an entrepreneur per se, so I don't have really a lot to talk about other than listening to the customers. A lot of our product gets built around what they're telling us when we come back from the field, how to make things easier, what their needs are. And even since my time that I've been there, the growth of the product, the growth of technology, even getting data out of a data logger that used to be a simple terminal program with 232. Now our products are cloud-based, and the data gets pushed to the cloud, automatically goes to the website. So just in the last decade or so, the advancement of technologies and the product being able to keep up. So that's a big thing between our competitors, the simplicity of, say, data management and so forth. So I just snapped a few screens today. This is our website if you're interested in going and looking at it. It's met1.com.
And I gave everybody a link to that video that you gave me.
Okay. So the video kind of, because we do a lot of international business, and Mr. Popper talks about that a little bit in that video. Did everyone get a chance to see it, or we can watch it again, or? So, did you get a chance to see it?
No.
Why don't we play that again? And
all
then,
right.
yeah, because that kind of, it helps with the international aspect of what we do. In 2014, we got an award from the state of Oregon as the export leader, as our growth in China really kicked off.
Try to turn the volume up here.
Wind speed, wind direction sensor. So running some testing. Benchtop particle counter.
And I hate to see those particle counters in China. Should it go this high? That's the pick and place machine that can make circuit cards. Sheet metal shop, CNC machine there. They're able to bend, produce the majority of the metal products that we use. So in 2013 in China, at the International Expo, it's a yearly event, and they have the American Pavilion as a part of it. So all the companies in this pavilion are U.S. companies. And at that time was when, in 2008 Olympics, you probably remember all the talk about air quality and so forth in China. And the equipment that was getting used to do that was made at Met 1. Made in Grants Pass. So the combination of this piece of equipment is a handheld device you can walk around with. So on the news when they were talking about people walking in that was what they had. At the embassy, they had a fixed machine called a BAM 1020. It works on a beta attenuation monitoring. So it's able to sample the air and separate particle sizes. So 10 microns and smaller is the health level that they were concerned about. So this thing on an impactor method is able to remove everything larger than 10 microns, or we can take it 2.5 microns and smaller, collect it on a tape, and by attenuation, when it was clean and when it's dirty, we can tell you how many particles, what the mass value is of the air. This is working now. We must change the batteries.
Thank you. So this machine's able to do that. And that's how they base what the air quality is. Even here, yes,
Well, how likely are they to try to copy it once they get it?
they've tried. So it's an ongoing thing. So a lot of, we have software engineers and so forth with our circuitry and et cetera, is the hard part to mimic. So what is happening in China specifically is when, in 2013, when they implemented that they were going to establish standards and so forth, and we're coming up to the end of that now, it's very similar to, if you remember, in the 70s, we did the Clean Air Act. And that was when our cities started to pay attention to pollution, Southern California, catalytic converters, and et cetera. And that's kind of the growth phase that they're in now. So the Chinese government has their equivalent to our EPA, and they've established certification criteria and things for these machines to prove that they work. And there's methods that is done to a manual method of collecting data, and it gets compared at a lab and so forth. And so that's what you have to be able to do this criteria testing to prove the efficiency of the machine. So some of the knockoffs per se have not been very, very efficient at that so far. So they are establishing regulation, just like with the US, on the performance of the machines.
That was in China this last year.
Shanghai or Beijing or,
Oh.
yeah. So.
And it wasn't bad.
It is approved a lot, and it's the same as here. Depends on the time of year, weather conditions, inversion layers, and so forth. So some days are not bad. Some days you can't see the building across the street. But they have set goals that they're working towards, and because there's one thing, like with our product, we can tell you what it is, but it doesn't do anything about it. It's then once you have this information, what are you going to do to correct that? And that was where, with us in the U.S., the catalytic converters, small checks, that sort of thing became mandated.
It's like they're looking at the data and they say, "Oh, we're dying. We better do something about it."
There's been a lot of attention about it. When at the 2013 Expo, we held an evening presentation for an after-hours thing, and it was one of the few times public speaking I was a little bit intimidated, because it was like 200 people, and this was like secretaries of state, commerce, trade, all suits, headsets. You felt like you were at the UN or something. So I got up and I turned around and I had a moment of no jokes, just professionalism. So that was, that's the point of they are taking it that serious there. So the ambient air quality equipment is our main products, but we do make meteorological systems and also the counters for clean rooms and hospitals and that sort of thing. And the associated equipment that's needed, datalogging. You can collect all the metadata that you want, but you need to be able to store it, get it transferred to some computer or somewhere to keep it. So we also manufacture data logging systems that can collect that. So
And they buy that.
they do.
They can't duplicate that.
We have competition, and that's where business comes into play on the quality of the product, the value for it. Our stuff's a little bit more expensive than a lot of the other competitors, but it's a higher quality, and there is world health standards on even meteorological equipment that it has to perform to a standard, wind tunnel testing, et cetera, so that you can spec sheet it on these are what the parameters are, and it meets that.
Also, trade secrets.
Yeah, well, a little bit,
Yeah.
but
Have to.
for the most part, it's technology that isn't. It's having a manufacturing facility that can make it is a big thing, and make it at a cost that they can afford to do it. So this is the AutoMet, so automatic meteorological data logger. So we can hook up wind speed, wind direction equipment, because even during the ambient particle aspects, a lot of times they need to know
where the wind's coming from. If they want to be able to say this factory is causing that, then they need supporting meteorological data that shows the winds are coming from that direction, particulates high, wind changes, particulates low. So that's one aspect of using, that's predominantly what our meteorological equipment is used for, as well as just fixed weather stations. And this spec sheet goes into all the, how many channels and various pieces of equipment that can go into it. So this is a solid state meteorological station. Built into it, it works on a sonic principle, wind speed, wind direction, relative humidity, ambient temperature, and barometric pressure are all given from this one sensor. So the years of needing an individual device for each of those items, you can still do that, and customers still choose to use old analog style wind speed, wind directions, are the solid state. My findings is when the younger people are making the decisions, they go solid state. Us older guys that like to see something turning, I can change a bearing, you know, we tend to go more for the old analog sensors. This is the BAM 1020, so this is the beta attenuation monitor that is our main flagship product. And as I was saying, it can take and pull the air in, and it works on a cubic meter, is how all the specs are. So when, even during the local fires and things, when they say the air quality is 150 micrograms, well, that's going to equate to a size, and that's how much is in a cubic meter of space. So that machine has been around for probably 20 plus years. It has all the US EPA equivalency approvals to it, that it meets all standards of being admissible data in the court of law to use this information with this machine. So there's other ones that are lower cost, but don't come with that level of information. So that's where the customer has to decide, what do they need to do with it? What level do I need to purchase to meet my needs? This is South Coast Air Quality Monitoring in Southern California, and these two products are something that we came out with a few years back based on neighborhood monitoring. So neighborhoods can afford $20,000 or $25,000 for a BAM 1020 setup just to have an idea about what the levels are. So this neighborhood network monitor was established, and it's a cloud-based sensor. So you mount it, get it 12 volts DC power. It's got a nephelometer style engine, a light optic sensor in it, and every 15 minutes is the default setting. It'll blast out to a website and say what the particulate levels are. It's very close. It's not as accurate as the BAM, but for informational purposes, neighborhood monitoring, these work very well, and the US EPA is starting to incorporate a lot of those into the areas that have more dense population. A lot of people want to know what the air quality is before they decide to go for a jog or a bike ride or something. So these networks are popping up a lot through the US. Relatively low user interface with it. Set it up, it goes, automatically pushes to a website. We could log in and look at them throughout the US, India, China, wherever they're being used.
I've got a question. How,
Yes.
do you ever clean them? Does the particles just keep building up? Or?
They do. And a lot of the engines, I stepped out of the camera.
Yeah, probably.
I got all excited there. So you use a sheet there. So part of the air going through is used to keep the chamber clean, so it doesn't stick to the walls and so forth. But they do need occasional cleaning. We recommend they come back once a year for our service department doing maintenance on them. If they seem like something's up, about the only user interface thing you're going to do is take a can of compressed air, like computer air, and blow it down through the tube. If you've got a little something in there, that will typically blow it through. And that's our handheld device that I was saying was one that they will walk the streets with and so forth. So I was just actually I was at the hotel and Eric called me. I was just in Beijing, what was that, about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah,
I guess?
right.
Yeah. And so that
It's
was
like, who is this? No.
So it was the 10th anniversary of the Olympics and so forth. So they were actually installing 2 new BAM 1020s on the rooftop of the U.S. Embassy. And part of that was ceremonies. A part of it was as they've expanded to installing these at all the embassies and consulates around the world. So they brought everybody in from Southeast Asia and so forth. And I ended up doing a 2-day training as a part of the festivities of all this happening. So,
Is any of your equipment geared towards detecting what's in the air as well as sampling?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good point because most of these machines are telling us what the level is, and from the health aspect, that's the first cut. The pollution can be a lot of different nitrates, organic compounds, etc. And so there's other pieces of equipment that you can actually take a speciation sampling and you put a 47 millimeter filter in it, you collect this sample, and then it actually goes to a lab somewhere, Intermountain Lab, something like that, and they can actually do, depending on what they're looking for, spectroanalysis, that sort of thing, and tell you actually what the composition is of a particulate. So you can come up with what the levels are and what it's primarily made up of. The latest expansion in our growth is actually black carbon, and which is primary diesel exhaust. China, India, very much so. The U.S. is starting to put a lot of interest in this. So that's part of our entrepreneurship is you start to hear these, this is where regulatory is going. And so we've put a lot of time into a monitor that now can take and sample the air and on the screen tell you of that sample, X amount is actually an organic or an elemental carbon. So that's the level that we're getting down to. And that's for the black carbon, we're talking in nanograms of particulates.
Just say tri-quarter.
What's that?
Just say tri-quarter.
Okay. So we, that's part of the risk of a company like this is we put a lot of time in development in this. It's been one of the new portable unit has been one of my main projects lately that we're ready to, if they do establish regulatory demands for it, we've already got the piece of equipment ready to go. And that's a big part of us against, our competitors. A lot of times, back when 2.5 regulation was mandated by the US EPA, we were about a year ahead of our competitor, ready for it. And therefore, when the states and counties were mandated they would start monitoring 2.5, we had the equivalency approval, and that gave us a very big leg up on the competitor getting into the US market. And therefore, that's made us look good in the international markets and help the growth as our international is developed. Questions?
Is there
Yes.
have you looked into using it for detecting environmental allergens?
Allergens and
Like pollen and stuff like that for people who have allergies?
right. Our equipment, for the most part, doesn't break it down into that level. Typically, the metals, heavy metals, irons, those type of things are more what ours gets used for. Yes.
So, I interviewed at Met One decades ago.
Okay.
Back here on Grants Pass, in
Right.
a little small area. And I know back then you were using heating lasers as part of the particle detectors at the time.
Right.
And I know you probably switched over to diodes by now.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that sense, are you still using the red wavelengths, or have you decided to use other wavelengths for particle count sizes?
Right. So yes. So like with the black carbon we're using from 350 to 980. So you're going from UV to IR, and that's how you can separate out what is organic and what is elementary. So yeah, the wavelengths has expanded for the various pieces of equipment. The basic optical engine is probably pretty much the same with a few changes to how they work from them. So you probably, when it was still 1600 Washington was the main building.
I mean, in the small building,
Right.
back then, it was up wherever it was.
Yeah, because that was what Tom and Lou bought
Right.
that building. It was just that one building. When I hired on there was maybe 60 people, 60 employees. And
It was probably even smaller than that because.
Right.
I was more of the optical person rather than, I didn't have enough electronics for
Right.
what he wanted at that
Yeah.
time. Because my direction was more in optics and
Yeah.
things like that, working on detectors and all that, so. But if you're using such a spread of, you should be able to get a spectral analysis out of that if you're using such a wide bandwidth of your laser there.
Right, the one black carbon is using 10 wavelengths.
Right.
So you can certainly do a spread. The two ends are the primary ones of interest. The portable units we're only going to do 2 wavelengths, but the BC1054 has the 10. That tends to fall into more academic universities, that sort of thing, want that much information. But for breaking it out on ECOC, those 2 wavelengths are the primary 2.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the people with the allergies in the
Oh,
valley.
yeah.
In the valley, it's saying you got the grass, you got the trees,
Right.
and everything else, and go like, man, you just close. Because I know they do get the recounts, but usually it's an analysis of,
Right.
they just suck in the air, look at it, and say, yeah, there's so many of the grass,
Yeah.
trees, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we haven't branched into that so much.
Yeah, I mean, real time is
Real
what
time.
people want.
Right.
Real time monitoring, then, oh, look, it's right up here in the screen, I know what's killing me.
Right.
Yeah, the only reason why I was thinking about
Yeah.
it was because usually there's a scattering effect that occurs
Sure.
with the different sized pollens, and
Right.
figuring that if you got a detector there, it could tell you, okay, it's scattering this way, as you know, because you can just see it from the trees that
Right.
look at sunlight or anything like that,
Sure.
they all have particle size. And so I'm thinking that with the detectors now,
Right.
what's coming out the door. I mean, what we dealt with 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, now it's totally different.
Right.
I mean, I just watched the case in point is the amateur astronomers are so right behind the professionals as far as detector analysis and everything now.
Yeah.
And there are programs available for almost for free that give you a spectral analysis of just using just a simple rating. Now,
Right.
And they can tell you everything about that. We're at that point. So I just see the convergence somewhere, that happening.
Right.
But you're probably thinking about that anyway.
Yeah.
If you're
well,
an R&D, if you're an
know-
R&D, you're thinking along those lines.
Sure. And it's, from a company, it's where's the market?
Right.
So, and typically our company tends to follow what the EPA is doing. That's kind of, what our existence is about, that and California Air Resources Board. And what they're saying their interest is what we kind of gravitate towards. And even our equipment, they'll come back with, we've had, it's called the SAS, an speciation sampler, and they've been around for 25 years. But now, and all this thing does, they're relatively simple, but they have to maintain a very controlled flow going through to collect the sample so that you know the volume of air that's passed through it. And it works at 6.7 liters per minute. So as they've used them, they've asked, well, we would like to do this, we would like to do that, and then that's where we have to redesign channels, say, so that one channel they can collect black carbon, so that channel needs to go at 22 liters a minute. So the retrofit and design of how do we take what's there off of our assembly line with minimum impact and be able to make these changes to it and still get product out the door without a great impact on manufacturing. So a lot of adapting to that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, is your, you talked about the EPA, and what about the European Union? And we got detectors in there as well.
Right. Yeah,
And
we
I can
got,
imagine them being really fastidious about it now, more than ever. I mean, I know China's just kind of like,
This
trying to get
started.
itself out of its hole, so to
Right.
speak. And how can we get there?
Don't forget about India, even worse.
Well, yeah, I know
they're,
India-
they're
yeah.
developing in India now.
Yeah.
But the EU TUV has already, because when I first started traveling from Mount One, that was most of my trips was to the Netherlands, England, France, so forth. And as they were developing their network, their networks are fully established, implemented rules and regs now. We still visit them, we still go and, and follow up, but they've pretty much become self-sustaining with local distributors and so forth.
Mhm.
The two growth markets for us right now is China and India.
Mhm.
Both are very big markets for us right now.
Sure.
But with that, then you've got a lot of international things to deal with, besides just getting passports and visas, shipping things.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
that's one of the main things about sales, like for, individuals or maybe, slightly, as you get further along, selling in China, could you give people like kind of a breakdown of what things, China or India in particular, what kind of basic considerations do they need to get in the market, and what should they be aware of, pitfalls specifically, for selling there?
Right.
Yeah.
So are there tariffs on business products?
There is now, yes.
There are tariffs?
Yeah, we're affected by the tariffs, and that's, and again, I'm not on that side of the house, so I don't directly deal with that, but yes, we're being exposed to the tariff, and it's affecting bottom lines.
Because we want to put more tariffs on them.
That's politics.
That's politics.
Yeah.
Yes,
How about South America, Brazil?
Yeah.
I know they're industrial.
yes,
India is really building up.
Yeah.
Are they concerned with air quality, or are they
Yes.
just not there yet?
No,
Is
they're-
that really hurting
they're not
them
to-
from about South
it's there. We sell throughout Central South America. I've done Costa Rica trips, Colombia. So their governments do monitor, and a lot of it depends on what it is they're wanting to monitor. So, say Costa Rica monitors a lot around copper mines. So they are keeping documents on how much disturbance and so forth of atmospheric conditions when they're doing this. Same thing in Australia. We sell a lot of stuff in Australia because they do a lot of
mining.
surface mining and stuff. So, because the equipment can get used for just regulatory health, it also gets used by construction companies and things that want to ensure that they're adhering to what their regulations are, and that nothing, that they're doing it the way they should be. They protect themselves from later having anything come back on them that they caused health hazards. The equipment, we have some of these systems set up that if they detect a level of particulate, they send out SMSs, or text messages to people. And so if it's a construction site, everything shuts down so they run the trucks. So that's like a follow-up level to the monitor detecting it. And then you set this that if it reaches 100 micrograms, the logging system automatically sends out text messages, and then they react so that they stay within what their guidance is.
What's the life expectancy on these instruments? Or like, how many years are they being used before they're either being replaced or updated?
Right.
And also curious how often these instruments need to be updated
Right.
just to stay competitive.
Yeah.
It's like every 6 months, things need to be reprogrammed just to kind of adapt to newer technologies
Right.
coming out.
That's variant on which piece of equipment it is. So across the spectrum of Met1 products, that's going to be variable answers on that. The beta attenuation monitor 1020 is pretty much the same design that it was the last update in 2007. the electronics and so forth of it, it does what it's supposed to do, and the keeping up with technology isn't a mainstay of that equipment for what it does. The other, like that new neighborhood monitor, to where they want it to be more of a techie piece of equipment, then that's where we're constantly looking at our cloud service for it, updating that to keep up with processor technology and so forth, to where it's reporting more of a real time. The beta attenuation monitor, it's an hourly machine. It's not per se a real-time monitor. It'll give an hourly value, but it's a daily value that is the weighted value of that unit. So with that, we don't need that mega speed processor in there to keep being able to report data. And I find interesting when I talk, we say real time. That's such a subjective term to people. Some people think real time is seconds. There's other people that will call an hourly reading real time. So it's kind of, I don't think there's a real definition on what real time means. As far as the maintenance and updating, again, it's variant on the equipment. We've got wind speed, wind direction sensors, old analog ones that are 35 years old and still working. So, we have our service department, and that's the big thing about our company being successful is the owner's thing is after service. Because it doesn't matter if we sell it to you, if it doesn't work and you don't look good with that piece of equipment, you don't know how to use it, and so then you're telling your boss, man, that won. So that is our thing, that we teach the maintenance to the equipment, and it's variant on which piece of equipment, and we have the service department follow up. You actually can get somebody on the phone when you call, even if that's not my product, but if he's at lunch, I can call you when he gets back. So
How long does it take to get through their shipping process? So like, I place an order for your equipment in China.
yeah,
And how long can I expect till it gets through? And
it is so variant based on when it hits customs. All of our, you got to have pro forma invoices and things that goes with it. So there's a lot of paperwork to start with. And even if you have all that right, once it gets to their customs, it's totally on them on how long they want to take to process it. So we could ship a piece of equipment and it'd be there in 4 or 5 days or 4 or 5 weeks.
wow.
Depending, because once it hits the international customs, it's out of our control.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's something that we have to take into, or at least the end user's purchasing has to consider when it's going to be there. Typically, it goes fairly smoothly, but
Sure.
I know I was waiting for an inlet tube in China, and I think like 6 days in a row we kept going down to just for this piece of anodized metal.
Right.
It wasn't, but until whenever they got to processing paperwork, so it's hit and miss. Yeah.
Is India any better or worse?
I think it's probably a little bit better. Yeah. But I think there's always still that,
Yeah.
even when they ship to here, possibilities of it hanging up, so. Yeah. Everybody. But I think for the most part, I don't think we have, and China isn't terrible. You
Yeah.
just have to anticipate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, every country, I'm sure, has idiosyncrasies and things that you can sell and things
Right.
that you can't sell. And some places you even got to grease the wheels a little bit in order to get things moving.
I don't know about,
It's
no,
like
we
you
don't.
You can't do that.
Oh, okay.
No,
No.
Yeah, Eric.
no, it's all,
We're gonna ask
it's all the system.
why with
Yeah.
shipment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What quality system are you using?
Excuse me?
Quality system for your manufacturing?
We're an ISO 9001.
That's
So,
one.
yeah.
You finally get your way, or it helps?
I think it helps. I mean, we've had it for about 10 years, and it was a big process getting everything up to speed with it. But without it, we weren't going to be competitive on the world market anymore, especially with that
Especially
time.
Europe.
Yeah, especially with
Especially
Europe at
France.
the beginning. If we wouldn't have done it,
Yeah, just-
we wouldn't be in business.
right.
So But now that, it's just become a mainstay of how we do business, it's, you have your annual inspections and stuff, but the teams are in place that it's pretty much just, you gotta stay up on it and do it, but it's just pretty much formality anymore. So no, I wouldn't say it gets in the way. It did take a lot of time to get it established. Yeah,
It does.
yeah,
Yeah, about 10% of your time.
Yeah.
Because when I was setting up ISO, and it was just kind of like, first thing I went to managers was saying, look, you're gonna have to set aside 2 to 3 hours
Right.
a week
yeah,
per employee to go through the process. I
Yeah.
said, it might be 5 minutes here, it might be 10 minutes here, or something like that, but you got your calibration of your micrometers, you got your calibration of this, you gotta follow this procedure,
Yeah.
here's the written procedure, and all this other stuff. And they looked at me like, what? Well, it's the investment that you're making.
that's it.
And you can't just walk away from it.
Yeah.
I said, whether you want to accumulate it at the end of the month, or you want to do it every week, it just depends, but you've got your process you gotta go through,
Right,
and that's it, and they were just like, what,
Yeah.
I said, well, yeah, if you want to be competitive, that's
it's
what
what's
you gotta do.
expected
It's
now.
what's
It
expected.
doesn't help you to have it,
Right,
it's just gonna hurt you if you don't.
right, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that certainly is not something that you want to not do well on your annual.
And it's very hard
inspection.
for managers to understand.
Yeah.
That's the buy-in that comes in from the top.
Exactly.
We will do
Yeah,
this.
and that was where Mr. Popper was very adamant,
You know,
this is
because
going
being the
this is
quality
gonna
person, they say, oh yeah, well you deal with it. No, you
Yeah.
don't understand. It's everybody. I'm just not gonna come in there and start doing this. It's everybody has to follow this. It's gotta be part of your life,
it's like, see, to continuously strive for improvement of product on time, every time.
Yeah.
You gotta know your mission statement, just in case you get
Yeah,
asked
I
in the
know.
hallway.
Right, so, do you have enough equipment, here's a theoretical question, you have enough equipment out there, I'm talking about real time or anything like that, but have you developed any software in the sense that if you collected, let's say over a 200 mile square area with the number of detectors, let's say 20, 30, 40 detectors, are you able to follow a cloud of material going across, or is it just individually, you're limited
Right.
to certain things?
We don't have, there's third party
Okay,
software companies that's what they do.
okay.
Because besides just our particulate monitoring, there's a lot more that goes along with these various EPA sites of gases, O2, NOx, ozone, and that sort of thing, and they monitor all that as well. So that's outside of our equipment. So there's software companies that have written AirNow, InvaDAS programs based on EPA's requirement for that sort of thing, to where they automatically collect from everything at a site, package it, send it as a site-specific thing. And we've got some firmware software programs for specifically our equipment
Right.
that works with our Met stuff, that you've got a rose compass, and you can show plume and so forth if something was to happen based on the modeling of the software.
Yeah.
But it's not to the scale of what you were saying, tracking it, unless you set up a network of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because for some reason, I see that coming at some point.
Yeah.
And one of the things in R&D is they always try to predict what people might ask
Right.
for. And it's saying, well, now with the computers and everything else, well, everything's all IT,
Yeah.
and Internet of Things, and so why can't you do this?
Exactly.
But here we got the software ready.
Right.
We've been doing this for 3
Absolutely.
or 4 years.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's where that aspect of it, some of the third-party software companies that started out doing the old hardware data loggers and now ESC data loggers and so forth, that were hardware, almost have all gone to computer-based modeling and so forth. So
I have a more consumer question. If I wanted to monitor the air of my house or something like that, could I just buy something from you guys? Is like basically not a commercial but a residential unit. You guys can't carry that.
well, our handheld products would be something that if you wanted to monitor.
How much would those run?
The handhelds are probably going to cost about $1,500,
Okay, $1,500. Okay.
roughly, in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been a big thing, low-cost monitoring, based on, and so like those sensors I showed, I said were down at the site in Diamond Bar, Rubidoux area. That was part of the testing EPA has done on low-cost monitoring, so that there's something that's affordable for neighborhoods to use. There's a lot of these out there that are very low cost, almost like a disposable level product.
Yeah,
We're not going to go to those,
Yeah.
at least not at this time. That's not.
Yeah,
part
well,
of this.
no, I mean.
But you could get. What I'm saying is,
Yeah.
for household use, there's probably some lower cost options you could find, and would meet your needs of monitoring what was going on in your house.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the level of accuracy of these.
Yeah. But sometimes with a lot of this stuff, if you go too cheap, then you don't really know what's going on in the area that you're monitoring. So sometimes
Exactly.
it doesn't. You're really cheating yourself a lot of times if you go too low.
And it goes back to what I was saying about our customer service, and the cost of that's got to come from somewhere.
Right.
So, with that, if you're having problems with it, you can call in, you can get assistance and so forth. A $50 monitor, you probably would never get anybody on the phone to help you if you have problems with it.
Hello.
Anything else?
Is there anything else you want to share about selling in these foreign markets at all? That you can think of in general, selling,
Right.
in these places, in India or China?
Right. Well, for the most part, what we do is, especially with the big international markets, we have distributors. So not so much in the U.S. We do direct sales for our U.S. customers, but for the product we're doing and so forth, you've got to have a distributor that is able to assist with all the nuances of getting into the country, getting to where it is, and then training with, because we've actually got a Chinese employee that is fluent in English, lives in Shanghai. So when I go to China, he's with me. So that, it just makes so much easier. So I guess maybe the answer to that is how much of a presence is your product going to have with you in the country?
Because I figure if you're getting to that point, you want to invest in an office or something there.
Right.
And you have on-site. And, I'm sure they offer that, just to sell, and they'll sell you the product, and you can have like a, distributing office
Right.
set up there, just to manage all that
Right.
stuff.
Right, and that's where, so we do have a satellite office in Shanghai. We don't have a satellite office in India, but that's where our distributor network comes in and the training with them. So we're very pro training, and then that's part of what a lot of my international trips are about, is doing training with distributors and so forth. Then the language barrier is the thing. Fortunately, English is kind of the business language of the world. Most of the distributors I go to at least have somebody that can translate for me.
So the distributors, they don't do exclusive your product.
It's very.
You
Typically,
have some that are exclusive.
yeah. Typically, if they're selling our beta attenuation monitor, that's what they're offering for particulate. They may have our competitors' gas analyzers and things that they do as a package, but typically they will go with one manufacturer's product to sell in that product line.
Let's think of these, so with the distributors, when it comes time for these instruments to have any service work done, are these distributors trained on how to service
Yes.
the products? I was curious if they're all coming back here.
Right.
kinda keep
We
the
try,
boxes
that's a
sealed
big thing,
up
that's a
and
really good
keep
question.
them alive.
And our business model is like, especially with our BAM 1020 unit, there's a couple of pieces in it that if they were to fail, there's no way around it, they have to come back because of the calibration it would need. That particular monitor, once it goes through its factory calibration, that calibration is good for the life of the piece of equipment unless it has a detection system failure. So either the beta source or this photo multiplier tube that counts the beta particles, if either of those have to be replaced, it has to come back to be calibrated on a smoke chamber. Other than that, we provide full mechanical equipment, electrical, and that's part of of, if you're our distributor, you're going to have people trained that it doesn't have to come back through dealing with customs and stuff to have a 15-minute repair done to it. And that's the ongoing training that we do, spending so much time visiting these countries to ensure that the distributors are up to speed on the repair of the product.
One of the things with.
And that's a big investment.
Yeah. I think one thing with the inventors group and entrepreneurs here is you get a product in there and you start negotiating everything like that. And I'm sure there's going to be an engineer there or one or two that's saying, okay, so how does this thing work?
Right.
What kind of defenses in a sense that you put in the
Right.
system that, okay, there's 4 screws in the back or something like that, you take it apart. And
Yeah.
Reverse engineering,
Exactly.
is one of the things that,
Right.
that I know.
And how do you
ran
keep
into.
proprietary?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
and so when I was working for the ophthalmic company, we had a lot of stuff that was inside there was black magic.
Right.
There was no way fine unless you're,
Right.
come back here. And I'm sure you have that with
And-
your own products.
Right, exactly. So the electronics aspect of it and the firmware, the operating firmware is the proprietary aspect that we don't share.
Right.
We don't share schematics,
Okay,
right. And we don't share, we'll share firmware updates, but we don't share the code
right,
on how to do that. So, and that's, the code is, at least at this point, without the right stuff, you can't extract it to see what the
Right.
code is.
yeah,
So that's what is keeping that product from being able to be fully emulated.
yeah, because one of the things we had with you can see the optics inside, you can see
Right.
what the lenses are and everything like that. But the detectors, good luck,
Yeah.
because whatever that's attached to the port, that's something we made internally.
Exactly.
Unless you know exactly what that
Right.
is. Yeah, you can see the trombone move back and forth. You might be able to take the lenses apart. and
Exactly.
things like that.
Same stuff.
Because it was, what was rather interesting was that when we got bought out by Carl Zeiss, that it was a fundus camera for photographing the
Uh-huh.
interior of the eye. And we had their camera for about 6 months and ran it through other doctors' houses and things, ran it through the whole thing to compare it to our new design of what we're doing. And one of the shocking things that when we took it apart was it was still made out of brass.
Yeah.
There was hardly any aluminum in it. And we're looking at each other going, why would they have brass from the 1850s in there and still some of the old rack and pinions and everything else?
Right.
And it dawned on us is because of the cost of electricity to make aluminum was far more expensive in Europe to get the aluminum to ship it to Germany to get it made, and so brass was a lot cheaper because you can cast it right
Sure.
there and you can manufacture it. And that was just like an aha moment, like, oh my God, it's like, and so when Zeiss finally fully moved in, I worked in the ophthalmic
Uh-huh.
industry, and so when they bought our company, it gave them an outlet in which to now develop all the products in the U.S. for the ophthalmic industry, and then distribute them out to the world that way. And
Right.
that way they got access to the needed aluminum and electronics and everything else, but they didn't have access to that in Germany. I didn't realize how, I'll be honest, but how primitive it was, compared to, electronics alone was just kind of like, I never saw resistors that big since the 50s.
Right.
And I'm like, why are we doing this, And same thing with the software, that was very key. So,
Right.
but I can see where the Chinese are at that point of trying to
Yeah.
simulate that information, in the right way. So,
Yeah. Well, and what has helped us with the Chinese market is and I don't know all the specific laws and things, but X amount of product that's made in the U.S. has to be imported to China. And so since all this stuff's made in Grants Pass, that was part of what Oregon's economical development helped us with back 2013, 2014, and led to this award was there was actually a state level person involved in all this that helped us navigate the path that our product could be used as part of what was deemed as made in America for imports. So that was a helpful thing to where our competitor, even though they're a U.S. company, they manufacture in China. So it's not made in the U.S.
Gotcha.
I got one more question. Are you guys thinking about or will have any plans to get into purifying the air as well as monitoring?
At this point, there's none that I'm aware
Oh,
of, there's
okay.
never any talk to it. That's why I was saying, our equipment can tell you what it is.
Yeah, right.
And then.
I just figured that maybe.
What are you gonna do about it, it's a whole nother.
Sometimes when you get to a certain, hey, what else should we should
Right.
do, guys?
Well, that's why I was saying, like now, our beta attenuation monitors,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff is pretty much established.
Yeah.
And you're right, we're always looking for what is the next market. Right now, we're seeing black carbon as the next market. So that's the next big product that we're developing, along with, it's constantly something that we're trying, and, with success there's failure.
Yeah, right.
So that's the same with this level of a company. At any given time, there's multiple products that we're looking into, working with, that might die on the engineering table, because you never know which one of those is going to be the one
Yeah.
that breaks out. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like anything, just like invention, you never know
Right.
what's gonna light people's eye, and then what's, just gonna gather dust.
Yeah.
So we have statewide smog testing coming up, is that why is it that black carbon is being looked into more?
It's being looked into predominantly for the international market. So far in the U.S., it's mostly being looked at on academics. Carnegie Mellon University has got a big project going that they've bought a bunch of black carbon monitors. So so far in the U.S., it's primarily academic.
I talked to a guy that lived in the UK, and he said that they were gonna start phasing out all diesels
Yeah.
that weren't a commercial truck.
Right.
Just because they said, yeah, we've done our research, and even if they get 50 miles to the gallon, they still
Byproducts.
put out too much
Yeah.
pollutants. So,
You gotta worry about that in Oregon so far.
not yet.
Yes.
So you're monitoring FDA reports closely and some of the research and what's causing damage to the human body, how accurate those experiments are? Because that's where that's where carbon is.
Right.
Especially the PM21.
Right.
It was out of the FDA studies. They're questionable, but generated a need.
Right.
There
And
are other things starting to show up with the FDA besides the small particulates.
not that I'm sure that there's people in our company that are watching that, not that I'm aware of. Typically, it's more with the EPA, which is probably driven
That's the next
along
step.
with that. Yeah.
From
So,
FDA to EPA.
so it's the EPA that we work closely with. I just did a meeting at Research Triangle Park a month or so ago about monitoring equipment and where we're going to go with products and so forth. So their guidance probably falls from that aspect.
I think that's it, and I appreciate you coming here, Steve. It was very informative.
Well,
And
thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'll give you a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
All right. So now that the video is over.